thank you for coming along on our little Zoom meeting today. I got some nice issues here to talk about and some resolutions hopefully to move forward. So this is the agenda for the Community Center Select Steering Committee meeting of Thursday, April the 1st. No April Fools there. And I'll declare the meeting open, and the approval of the agenda and late items, Steph.
So we're going to slide Jacqueline Massey's presentation into Gillian's update. Gillian, do you want to speak to?
Sure, it's actually going to be after the proposed expansion section.
Okay, so 4.3.
Yeah.
Okay.
And other business becomes
under
4.4.
other business. Yeah. All right, Jackie. Super. Jackie update.
And was there something else, Gillian?
No, and the Jackie update is specifically about the donor recognition.
Okay.
No report.
Can everyone on the island hear that horn?
I heard it through my office and through my earbuds, like from some of your.
From me, I don't know. Is that does that go like all over the island, or is it sort of just?
No, I think it's pretty much in the bay here.
Just the bay.
What is it?
Okay.
Not Cove, yeah. I
The
think so.
ferry horn.
Yeah, Allison didn't hear it. She's on the other side.
Well, I just heard
No,
a horn
that's
in the
right.
background, but if it was a ferry horn, I was curious as to why anybody would ask if it goes all over the island, because
Well, I'm new, Allison, so I don't know how far that horn
Just
goes.
catch it.
That rhetorical question was a little loaded, Allison.
Leave her alone.
It's very,
Okay, so-
it's very loud.
It's almost a year that I've been here, so I still have a few more days to use that excuse. I'm new.
Absolutely. I'm with you, Jimmy.
Same with you, Liam.
Okay.
We've got a couple more days, and then
Yeah,
we
We'll
can't.
have
And
to
we
get
can
together and
ridicule you.
celebrate our 1-year anniversary.
Woohoo.
move to the south side of the island and you can hear the big ferries tooting when it's snowing or when it's foggy out.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no getting away from it. You're on an island. Okay, so I'm going to move the approval of the agenda as amended, unless somebody has some other comments. Looking for a second out there somewhere.
Second.
Well, bad crowd. Okay, Allison. I'll take Allison. All in favor, aye.
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 All right, we'll move down to the adoption of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to go through these minutes from the last meeting?
I have
Allison has
a
her hand
question.
Okay, Allison, go ahead.
I think maybe I'm under schedule update from Sam Collins, and Sam isn't here, so we can't necessarily answer it. But I don't think the gap analysis had anything to do with the building permit expiring. I think that was because, or was that where they were doing a gap analysis of the difference between what was in the building permit, building code before it got changed?
Yeah,
Oh.
it was.
That's probably what it was, yeah.
It's
Go ahead.
that the code changed.
Okay, so I think so it's the building permit was out of date due to building provincial code changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What page is that on there?
I'm on page 4 of the
Yeah.
agenda, or the
Okay.
second page of the minutes under new
Under
business.
new
There it
business.
is. Yeah, building permit was now out of date. A gap analysis had been completed.
And it says new priorities would be included in the renewal application. And so
Yeah.
that made me think you'd added a few things for office space and stuff at that point. Or
Right.
we're
So
thinking about adding it.
It's almost like a separate piece. It's a good catch,
Yeah.
Allison.
It's third
yeah,
bullet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
What am I
maybe,
doing? So building permit was now out of date, and then a new bullet for gap analysis.
Yes.
yes. And then after where it says building permit was out of date due to provincial building code changes.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Nice clarification there. Anything else? And I'll move the adoption of the minutes from December 4th, 2020 as amended.
Second.
Thank you, Allison. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay. Move on to some of the good stuff now. Public comments. Do we have anybody out there? No, thank you. And new business. So we're gonna do 4.1 is a project update, and that's over to Gillian Drake, Manager of Recreation and Community Services. Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you, Mayor Ander.
Right over to you.
Actually, Liam's going to start the screen share
Okay.
presentation. It's
All
a
right.
Yes.
collaborative effort with us and Sam
Oh, I
too.
like that. I like collaboration.
Yeah, so do we. Actually, sorry, just recalling now that Sam said he couldn't come till 3:30. Liam, if you
Oh.
recall, you were saying that. So
Okay.
Do you have the link, Jillian? Did I include that?
So are you wanting to wait on that item until Sam gets here?
We'll
No,
we'll push it down the road. We'll just carry on and around him, and then when he gets here.
Yeah, I think we can
Yeah.
carry on, and if we have if we have questions that we feel Sam is best to answer, we can hold them or
Okay. Perfect.
hold the responses till he gets here. But yeah, there was somebody had a question about whether Sam had the link or not. Jillian, do you know if you forwarded?
yes, he does. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the agenda for this presentation is to provide folks with a schedule update, work in progress that basically what has occurred since our last meeting, and proposed expansion area of the building site for the project, and then donor recognition update from Jackie. Now, Sam was going to provide the schedule update, but I'm happy to provide that, and then Gillian will provide the update on what has been accomplished to date since our last meeting. Nothing has really changed in terms of the schedule from our last meeting. And so we're still on track for finalizing our tender documents and going for tender release in May. And part of that process requires us to come to the BIM Council for approval
Gate
to
5.
release. Yeah, for the Gate 5 approval.
Yeah.
And so we'll be bringing this back to this committee as well for the Gate 5 approval. But we're having this meeting today to provide you all with an update, just because it's good to keep everybody up to speed, and predominantly also to discuss the expansion area that is needed for the project. So we're still aiming for a tender close in July, and ideally hitting Gate 6 in August, where we would proceed to award the contract for ideally site mobilization and beginning of the project in the fall.
Sorry, Liam, I just let Sam in the room.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Hi, Sam.
Hey, everyone. Hey.
Hi, Sam.
So Sam, you're here earlier.
Community center.
This is great. I took the liberty of just diving into the schedule. So, but you can help field any questions that might come up.
Of course.
And so I was just saying that, yeah, we would ideally be targeting, we're still targeting the fall for, project to commence to construction with, that's with the notion that we have a successful tender, successful bid. And then if that occurs, we're targeting summer 2023 for commissioning, for a transition to opening the facility. So I'm going to pause there, and this is the same as what we presented in the last meeting, and so no real changes there. But if anybody had any questions on this.
You're not really planning on releasing the tender in May 2020, or?
Should
Probably
say
not.
2021.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
good catch. I'll change that right now. Oh.
Okay.
I think you just
We probably were actually, Allison. I mean,
Well, I know we
joking
were
aside.
originally. I'm getting really tired about the questions every time we drive down the road and himself looks at the sign and says, All right, when are you going to get started?
Yeah, I know.
So is 6 weeks normal
Yes.
For the tender?
for the tender?
Yeah.
For a
for
project this
market?
size,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we'd probably start earlier in our documents, Allison, so you may see a discrepancy in the invitation to bid that's more like a 4-week tender and build a bit of buffer for additional time if teams needed, or a 4.5-week
Oh,
tender
okay.
is pretty typical for a project this scale.
And then in order to, if we don't approve it until the middle of August, can they actually mobilize in September?
That might be a stretch. And so it depends on how ready they are to go. And we'll, when we get to the next part, or the part of this presentation around the site expansion, that speaks a bit to how I could imagine some site mobilization occurring quite soon after tender award.
Okay. Sam, it's Gary. Welcome. Nice to see you.
You too.
Do you feel, what's the environment like out there right now? What's been happening? You know, cost-wise, busy-wise? There's a lot going on.
That, you know, Squamish just hired some consultants for their new works yard.
Okay.
And I mean, that's not construction, but it's all tied together. It's the same sort of industry. And there's over 20 consultant teams bidding on that work, and their fees are incredibly sharp in what they are. So the design industry, which feeds into the construction industry, is still busy and hungry, and part of it's because Alberta's driving competition.
Oh, okay.
So we're still seeing Alberta players in the BC marketplace in construction that drive the competitiveness of local contractors' prices down.
Yeah.
And so they're still trying to win work. The big pickups of BSP.
Hang on, I'm just going to get out of the meeting. Okay.
The big busy pickups of the trades for things like Broadway subway projects, Surrey Langley SkyTrain, and some of these other mega projects that are in our region haven't hit the market yet, although those projects are moving forward. But generally the bulk of projects also from the ICIP, I haven't seen a huge pickup from them hitting the streets either. I mean, everything's busy, but people are still very, very competitive.
Awesome. Well, that's good news. That's a positive for the time being anyway. Thank you.
Price of lumber is going up like crazy though.
Yeah.
So there's these market things in the, that's an impact. Don't know what's offsetting, but right now it seems like it's a 6 1, half dozen of the other when it comes to total tender close values.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions about schedule? So we'll move to the next slide, and Gillian, pass this off to you.
Sure, thanks. So just a little more detail on some of the design issues that we've been working on, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of finalization of the design work to happen at this stage in order to get to tender. So we were really focusing on addressing what are emerging as deficiencies that could seriously have impacted operations down the road. So I'll tell you about some of those. Storage was a big one. Right. So as you know, we're building this building to accommodate the community in so many ways and with so many unique requirements for furniture, equipment, supplies. You know, thinking just, for example, what the small multi-purpose room. Imagine it's for toddlers in the morning with toddler safe equipment and supplies. Maybe there's a senior art class followed by an after-school program, followed by a community group renting the space. So we need to kind of create spaces that are blank slates for all of those operations. And with everybody having all different needs, without storage in the rooms, it would have been a lot of staff time moving supplies around the building continuously, which would have been pretty challenging to do. So, so through a lot of the millwork design and being very clever and flexible with that, we think we've come up with some great solutions, and I'll address a little bit more of that down the road. Not just supplies and materials, table and chair storage is another big one that emerged as a real challenge. And from what I've learned along the way, either it was a suggestion, idea, or a decision, I'm not sure, that we would not store any tables and chairs, and for all needs, we would be renting them and bringing them in. Well, you can imagine the cost that would be involved and how difficult that would be for some community groups and even us just running a little class. So working with the designers, we were able to carve out a space that we can accommodate tables and chairs on site and accessible to every room and able to move them around. So that was a really big one. The recreation classroom was another one that we needed to find a bit of a solution in order to have a minimum size in place where we could store the spin bikes, yet have adequate space in order to hold classes such as yoga and Pilates at a place where it is cost effective, our instructors will want to do it, and we can fit more than about 5 or 6 people in the room. So with a little adjustment there, again, we found some space that we feel will really work well for the community, and we're able to run those classes and store the bikes at the same time. Are there any questions before I move to some of the other content?
Gillian?
It's Allison.
When you say you found some space for, it's that you're meaning space in the community center, not space off-site.
Correct.
Correct.
It's,
okay. And tables and chairs, well, there's all sorts of fancy flip-up ones that are on wheels that you can roll away really easily. So hopefully we're looking at something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, they tend to, sometimes those accommodate they take up a little more space, the ones that flip and roll, in terms of how you can store them. So, but we've had a number of conversations with the architects on this issue about how to fit in those tables and chairs. So I think probably that the need for them to be lightweight and easy to move and take up minimum space, those will be some of our priorities when we're choosing the actual tables.
I think an important piece to add here is that as the project gets closer and closer to its full detailed design, Gillian and I have been, and with Jamie and Jackie as well, have been discovering little deficiencies here and there. And when we talk with the architecture team, some of the response has been like, oh, well, we weren't going to deal with that unless it became a reality. And we're like, well, we're very much in the reality mode now. And so the fact that there was no storage for tables and chairs was a bit of a surprise to us. And so we're really at a place where we've hammered through a lot of these deficiencies, some of them small and minor, and some of them I think a little more important and significant.
Yeah, they're all pretty significant though. The bottom line. So well done, you guys.
Yeah, and as we do that shift from in planning to really thinking operationally as we would function in the space, it's shifted some of the thinking. And I think one of the things that's really important to remember, and we've been trying to stay cognizant of this as we're doing this work, is that after a year functioning in the space, we may find that what we planned on and what the community has identified and what we're doing, the shifts, there's a bit of a shift in the need and the interest. Community trends change, the demographic of the island has changed significantly in all these years as well. So building in some flexibility to be able to change with changing demand and operations, I think has been really key. And we've tried to keep that flexibility in mind with things like the mill work. So, making sure we're trying to plan things that have adjustable shelving, basically like just give us adjustable shelving we can lock, we can close it and adjust it and work with what the need is as it continues to change and emerge. The other piece I want to say before going into a little bit more about acoustical and some other pieces, that the other piece that's been utmost on our minds as we go through this is really focusing on maximizing the value and the performance of our choices and the features and the elements, maximizing that in the community use and the community facing the public, really public spaces, such as the reception areas and the community conference room. And in contrast that to areas, for example, like the municipal office spaces where we're lowering the value and performance and seeing where we can be most cost efficient in areas that are a little bit less higher profile than some of the others in the space.
That's a good point to make also for, I think when you're talking about these changes, we've had to evaluate highest and best use of floor area space as well. Like one of those tweaks to get extra storage and better use of space was maybe moving in an interior wall. It doesn't necessarily mean the building was changing too much, but if we could add square footage to one room because it had a higher value use with the spin bikes than the weight room, there's slight tweaks within the design that way as well, but no paradigm shifts. It's just about making a value assessment for the room.
Thanks. Just to touch on a couple of these a bit more, we've spent quite a bit of time working on looking at the acoustical treatments in the building throughout. As you know, it's a very open, high ceiling room, especially the community living room and the small multi-purpose room. So we can imagine the acoustics in there if the sound treatments weren't really thought out properly. So we want groups to be able to use that space and hear each other. And just in the reception, for example, is close by as well. So we have to make sure that we're building in acoustical treatments that the sound's not just bouncing unpleasantly throughout the entire building. So it's we're looking at something that's a balance of wall, floor, and ceiling, hanging from the ceiling types of treatments. So there'll be a number of areas that it's taken into account. Again, wall treatments, what are the areas in the building that we can expect there'll be high usage in those rooms, and potentially the walls are a little more beat up than in other spaces. So making sure we maximize the performance in those spaces and taking away a little bit some of the features perhaps in areas where we could remove it. So for example, removing the wainscoting in the office spaces. That's a wall treatment that we thought, well, that one we can take out and put that higher value in a public space. Door hardware, as you can imagine, a lot to figure out with how doors open and close, what's the key hierarchy, all these kinds of things. It's all these levels of decisions at this time.
The key hierarchy, I love it.
Oh yeah, we had quite a bit of discussion
Something
about.
I never thought you'd be doing, right?
I know, I didn't realize. Yeah, and it's even down to the millwork. You know, if we're building all these lockable cabinets, well, how do we schedule those keys for all the cabinets? Who has access to what? And yeah, countless decisions in these areas of these fine details that we're working through. I'll just pause, see if Liam or Sam or Jackie, Jamie want to add anything into all of that. No? Okay.
I don't see anything.
Great. So now we'll think about the exterior. So that's just some of the work we've been doing on the interior. But there were, pressures on the exterior design that we notified, and there would be talk more about that as we go through. But with the next slide, we can look a little bit at one of the main issues we were addressing.
No, I hate to interrupt the flow, but the other thing we probably should have added there is the redevelopment of a building permit application. I know we talked about it last time, but that's been another stream of work. So speaking for the design team and others, lots of congruent work happening simultaneously. Those elements that we just touched on, and now we're going to get into the site, but from a professional perspective as well, we're also resubmitting and getting an updated building permit because our old one's from 2018 and the codes keep changing. So that's another stream of work that's been accomplished in the last little while.
Super.
We don't have the new building permit yet, though, do we?
Well, we're just doing an amendment to our existing one by updating, like, so we had to get some new geotechnical studies because this, you know, little bits of extra support for for a revision to our updated BP. Sorry, Gillian and Liam.
No, absolutely, it's fine. So looking at this image here that's on the screen, on the left was the proposed.
Can you make the image bigger, like maybe get rid of the thumbnails on the left side?
How's that?
That's better,
Yeah.
but blow it up a bit. If
Go into presentation.
you set it to play PowerPoint, you get rid of that stuff, don't you? And we
Yeah,
can get this-
I think you'll lose the way PowerPoint works. You probably don't see it as the full PowerPoint right now, do you?
No, I'm seeing your toolbar across the top and everything, and so
Yeah.
it's just
So
yeah.
here, let me do this, because the way PowerPoint works, it changes the screen that it moves to when you load it.
Yeah,
Okay, so now is that better?
that's better. But could you make it a little bigger? And I'm on my big laptop.
Now I have to stop. To make
Oh,
it bigger, you
never mind. Okay, go back.
definitely
Forget
have
it.
to.
Alison, you may be able to just minimize seeing us and maximize.
Yeah, no, I'm going to do that anyhow. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going back to the old screen because I can make it a bit bigger. This isn't so much about seeing the detail in this screen. Rather, it's about hopefully you can see the footprint of the building. And so that was the original design footprint with the original entrance and parking. And this is the new footprint, which is very, very similar, just slightly larger.
Yeah.
So one of the,
Go ahead, Gillian.
okay. So say one of the challenges that we noticed with the plan on the left was a lack of function for access of vehicles and pedestrians. You know, particularly if you think of people just dropping off and picking up people from the community center. In this previous plan, there was no way to turn around easily and get out. So it's easy to imagine the congestion that would occur along that. Like imagine 180 people coming out of a performance and how this would function. So, you know, we spent quite a bit of time working with the design team to think about how can we improve this? How can we build in a little bit of a turnaround point in order to let vehicles get in, drop off and turn around and get out and not have to continue all the way through the parking to find a way to get in and out. So at the same time, considering how service trucks would get in through there. So how would a propane truck get in to fill up or the garbage truck get in? So thinking about, you know, how could this be improved a little bit? And we're very pleased that they presented this option on the right that allows for vehicles to come in, drop off, turn around and get out again. And as you can see, it takes up a little bit of space from the grass field, a very, very small portion of the space that would just mean a moving of the front sign a little bit. And we've been in great conversations with the school and the football club, and everyone is in favor of this approach because they also recognize that would have presented some challenges for them potentially as well with that congestion at that location. Just pause for a moment.
This was an area that we felt really needed to be improved because we could just imagine parents or family members or friends driving in, dropping off, and then having nowhere to turn around. And if this was full of parking, they'd have to go all the way to the back and turn around. And so we really wanted to work to get a turnaround. The different circles represent different vehicle types. The darkest orange in the center is the turning radius required for a standard passenger vehicle. And then the darker one is the radius required for a community bus, because we wanted to explore the option of the community bus being able to come in and do a turnaround, but that's just not possible because you can see the radius is too great.
Yeah.
The bigger circle is the radius for like a full fire truck or a full coach bus. And that's just not workable for our site. And so we're glad we can at least get a vehicle turnaround. And for the community bus, then we're just going to have to work with another option potentially of having a bus stop between the entrance to the facility and the Mount Gardner Road turnoff. And so we'll have to work with the school and TransLink about possible stop somewhere along there, as well as a stop on the other side of the road for those that are coming from elsewhere on the island.
Yeah.
So where does the that gravel parking area that's beside the field and between the field and Trunk Road right now, is that been incorporated? Is that part of the?
That's basically the entrance.
Okay, that disappears with the entrance.
Yeah, that if you can see where my cursor is right now,
Yeah.
that's basically where the gravel is right now.
There's two things maybe to add. I mean, we maintained the fire truck access to the field of play in this design, which is an important aspect. There's sort of an emergency access, Allison, right there.
Yeah, there's some gates right there. Yeah.
So that's maintained. And the larger service vehicles, they'll still have to do their hammerhead turn at the back of the lot. So that was all part of the discussions and conversations to.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I asked about the gravel parking area is whether that could be utilized as a drop off for a bus.
Well, that's, as you can see, the gravel parking area that exists right now is right here.
Okay.
And the diagonal red line that I just put on the map is that fire emergency vehicle access to the back of the school, which would go across
the field.
The field.
Yeah.
What we're proposing as a design here, and the next slides will take us to the expanded area request, would provide even better, potentially better access to the back of the school. And this may no longer be required, but we have to leave it in play until the facility is built and until we can better understand the access. For the community bus, we really tried hard to figure out how could we make that work. I had come up with this crazy idea with like an in and an out, and there'd be another island here, but from a traffic and pedestrian safety point of view, it was felt that there was just too many access points and too many pedestrian crossings. And so,
well, also from a scheduling perspective, if you're talking about when you're referring to the community bus, I'm assuming you're meaning not a busload of people specifically coming to the community center, but the regular hourly shuttle service that meets the ferry.
That's right.
Yeah, and they don't have time to go off the road because they've got to get all the way to Blue Water and back. So we have to drop them off on the edge of the road. They can't meet the schedule otherwise.
That's right. That's a good point. If we have an event that is bringing a busload of people, and that could be a coach, the coach can still come in, and because these grayed out areas here are not hard infrastructure, and all of the curbs will be rollover curbs, especially here to allow that emergency vehicle access. So a large coach could still come in here and park and unload and then do the hammerhead turnaround here, the big turnaround and come back out.
And that's assuming a large coach would come on the ferry. We don't have any here, and we discourage them from coming because they can't turn around in our roads.
Right. Okay, even better than the small coach. So there's still opportunities for them to come in. It's just not going to be a quick and fast community shuttle bus or transit bus.
And another point about the community bus is that The greatest likelihood of people getting off the bus to come to the community center is when it's on its return route to the cove. So stopping on the other side of the road. People would be picking up the bus to leave the community center, heading back out towards Blue Water.
Yeah.
So that helps a little bit.
And the Eagle Cliff bus.
Right,
Yeah.
well, they'd have to walk down the hill to get to that one.
Yeah.
But there is a bus stop just down the hill as well. So it's, they could easily just walk down to get on the bus to leave.
Yeah.
So I think that segues nicely, Liam, into the next section.
Okay.
So I can't recall, Gillian.
This was just we wanted to just a reminder from the last meeting that, the pressures on the footprint and of what was adjusted. And so I don't think there was anything really to discuss on this one, but a reminder as we get into the next phase and just thinking back on the previous slide as to what those pressures on the site were that's changed the surrounding area and infrastructure, the civil infrastructure of the site.
And so with the pressures on the site, when we look back to this slide, we see that much of the parking along the building edge remains, but the parking along the fence edge, it's disappeared because we also felt that this was too tight and that we needed easier and better access to the parking. And then as well in the back of the building, we lost this parking because we started getting too close to the steep edge. There's an embankment, quite a steep cliff off the edge. And we also needed to improve some of the access to garbage collection, recycling collection, and things like that in the back here. It was very tight before. So what we're looking at now is, to meet our own zoning requirements, we need to find this additional parking that we've stripped out. Plus, any additional parking that we could get would be highly beneficial for the facility, because we've known all along that parking was going to be an issue. And then even perhaps more importantly than parking in and of itself is during construction, we want to be very clear with the vendor that their trades, their construction vehicles are going to have to stay in a designated parking area. We don't want them scattered throughout the cove or up and down the Trunk Road Hill. And there was never any consideration for where would the laydown area be for the construction, or where would there be a staging area for the construction. And so we felt like, okay, well, we really need to think about the construction needs and additional parking needs. So we started exploring that. And in exploring that, we looked at the entire lot 2 of the community lands, and which is this blue line here. And we basically identified, well, here's the land allocation to the community center itself as it currently stands. We're pushing right up against this boundary, which is that steep drop off, which I mentioned, and another steep drop off on this edge. So this land here is not really usable at this point in time. And so what we came up with was this idea that we could potentially secure additional land north of the existing community center lands to help satisfy those needs. As I mentioned, it's a really cost-effective way to deal with the construction. So they've got staging, laydown, and parking. We've got additional parking for the center itself. And it also could be an area where staff are parking, and so that staff aren't taking up any parking right adjacent to the facility itself. There'd also be additional area for additional community activities or facilities. There's a lot of discussion right now in the community around a skate park. And, you know, there's the possibility that we could be putting a skate park in this zone. That would go quite nicely with the entire community campus feel. Because in this area here, we have the bike park that was recently built as a collaborative project. And we have the school itself, we have the tennis courts, the turf field, the soccer field. We know that the children's center is looking to put an after-school care facility on site, the community center. If we had a skate park here as well, that would be a pretty nice amenity. Or it could be something completely different. As well as it provides possible access to the back of the school and future access to the rest of these lands should they be developed or when they are developed, and as well as that emergency access that we talked about. So what our design team came up with, and this is all just very draft and you know, open for comments and suggestions and what have you, but we saw this part of the building footprint and the entrance to the site. This is where we would continue the driveway as it currently exists down the slope to a parking area. The parking area could easily be shifted one way or the other or amended to the best possible spot. We would also propose that the parking area would be more of what I was calling a Bowen style parking. So it's literally bringing in some crushed material for road base and gravel for a top. You know, the architects quickly assumed we were talking about a
Fancy paved parking, yeah.
Yeah, and it came back with like you know, over $1 million price tag, and it's like no. We're talking about something in the tens of thousands, not in that range.
And to some degree, you know, I don't want to get everyone's hopes up because we haven't done detailed cost analysis of it, but there is precedent of, you know, contractors needing that space anyway, so they're going to run their cat through it or their excavator, create a bit of a laydown zone, and so a lot of the cost gets absorbed within the general conditions and overhead that would be already considered as part of the budget. And we've seen that in other projects where by giving the contractor some rough area to create their own laydown, the cost benefit of the parking does get realized.
Yeah.
What's the light blue?
Oh, this here or this light blue?
Well, that was going to be my second question, where your cursor is now.
So this turquoisey light blue tongue looking weird shape is rainwater management.
Okay,
so all
stormwater.
All on-site rainwater will flow into this swale, and we're trying to minimize any rainwater from moving off the site. This light purplish color is the draft proposed trailways. We've looked at this and realized that this trail, as shown here, is not realistic in the immediate future because this is the edge of the soccer field and it's really steep, and it would require a significant amount of geotechnical work and restabilization, and so this wouldn't exist, but this little trail following this slope would. And then this would be, again, that wouldn't exist in this shape either, but there'd be some sort of connector. There already is a natural connector from the school to the existing trail that's back here. The principal of the school and the community coordinator, Sarah Haxby and Scott Slater, are very keen about this idea, the idea of the increased access back here, as well as the idea of a skate park. We were all kind of envisioning something happening right here for a skate park because of the natural contours. You could actually build right up against this embankment and that would actually help stabilize the field, which has got some slight slumping occurring in that back corner. But that's a whole other project. It's just trying to show the synergies that could occur.
I guess to that point, you know, that parking's shown as a rectangle, and just for absolute clarity,
Yeah,
it's not necessarily a rectangle. It's more about the stall count.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we built that parking on the other side of Miller Road behind the RCMP in that area. And it very much sort of follows the contours of the land, and
Yeah.
cars are fitted in between trees and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully it, you know, would end up being similar. So from a practicality question, the little sidewalk that you've got running almost parallel to the road, why wouldn't it be a sidewalk on the edge of the driveway road so that it's easier to clear and it's easier to keep track of and all that sort of stuff, rather than creating a whole new something?
this sidewalk here.
Yeah, no, this top little curvy bit that goes to the parking
The one
lot.
that
Why?
follows the road. I think it's just about a
Oh, here.
natural, easy path to follow. Again, and that area will be cleared out. And Allison, it's pretty conceptual drawing, I guess is
Yeah.
all I would say at this point. It's
Just think about ongoing future maintenance and looking after it, practicality perspective, when it's
Yeah.
actually where it's going to go.
Yeah. And with this idea too, if we were able to secure this additional land, we are proposing that we would put the propane and the standby generator on this downslope. And then if and when that generator kicks on, it's the noise
Not noisy.
yeah, it's buffered, it's down below. It's only a standby generator. So it would come on a scheduled basis, like our current one does, just for maintenance purposes, but otherwise it does, you know, it probably wouldn't kick on very often.
but also from the propane perspective, anything we can do to try and decongest the upper area, and it can, with traffic from filling and whatnot, that's a benefit. And getting anything that's potentially an explosive away from the building is also a benefit. So
Yeah.
both of those are your things that are fuel fired.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So how does this impact the plans that we did in 2014 when we did the rezoning, which was to have some residential sort of north of the community center?
There's still room down there, Allison, I think.
Yeah, so if we look at this slide, we did go to the mayor's standing committee with this as well to get their input on it, and they had the same question, so it's a very good question. And originally I was proposing that we take this dark blue line in this way. They suggested no, we go in this direction right to the edge of Seniors Lane, and that we leave that space up there for potential housing projects, or so there's still adequate space in this area for housing, which is what it's currently zoned to allow for.
Yeah.
And in talking with Daniel, you know, he said that if we were to bring this to council, and council were to approve it, it'd be a very simple amendment to the bylaw with the zoning map, and that you could also still allow for multiple future uses in here. One of the things the select standing committee talked about was on this edge along Seniors Lane, it's incredibly steep and it's not favorable or affordable for housing or any development at this time. But in 30 years, maybe it will be, or maybe it will, you know, maybe it's 40 years or something. So there's still an opportunity to utilize that.
Row housing along there or something.
Yeah, you could put row housing in there, and that could be accessed from Seniors Lane.
And a comprehensive redevelopment could redevelop the parking to get more parking for whatever is built in that area.
We could easily, because it's quite a drop. I don't have the picture here, but there's a good picture of Drew and Craig, our architects, standing in this kind of zone here below the soccer field. And you can see, like, it's a 4.5 meter height difference from where the current elevation is to the top of the soccer field. So if land became a premium and we really wanted additional expansion of the rec facility, you could likely keep the parking at grade and build over top of it. And then that would keep it at the same elevation
level,
of the, So what were our primary question for this portion of the presentation today is to seek this committee's approval to make this recommendation to council, that the Community Center Select Steering Committee recommend that council approve the expansion of Area 3 of Lot 2 of the community land by approximately 1.2 acres as shown in the proposed zoning area boundary presented at the April 1st, 2021 Community Center Select Steering Committee meeting for additional parking to meet present and future requirements and for future expansion of community center facilities.
So do you want to say community center facilities or community?
Community
use
facilities? You could just say community facilities.
Yeah.
Or for future community facilities, not even expansion.
There we go.
Yeah.
And that council directs staff to prepare and present to council the necessary amendment bylaw to the land use bylaw number 57 for first reading.
Well, I'll move that. Do we have a second out there? And then we can have a discussion about it.
I'll second that, Gary.
Thank you, David. So anybody have some input on this particular recommendation? Or do you think it's a go? We can just vote on it. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'm comfortable with it, but I would ask if what we anticipate to be concerns and objections, like why we didn't do this in the first place, because the lot looks pretty small when you look at it on that overhead beside the field. The parking, even with the expansion, is extremely limited. And what impacts or what advocates out there might consider that it's too much to do in that forested area. I'm in favor, but I just want to be anticipating and have good answers for anyone who might object in the council meeting.
It is a really good point, Robin. I'll just put my 5 cents in here. Is that, the original sort of boundaries for the community center were just that they were lines on a map. And
Gary, I was there and they weren't just lines on a map.
Well, I would argue that, but it's always been the intent, though, to if we think about a community campus and that sort of thing, to wrap it right around to the school. It's always been the intent to try to procure more land for the facility. The last thing we want to be doing is getting squeezed on the community campus idea. I agree, and there's not much as far as the trees are concerned. There wouldn't be much. That's all sort of second growth alder and stuff, and what there is there isn't very significant. But that's also a very good point. Anybody else? You got a hands up operation here?
Gary?
Yeah, go. Who's that, Allison?
Yeah, sorry. So in 2014, we had huge reports and discussions about and we had plans and sketches and drawings of what would be there for buildings for community center and all that sort of stuff. And then, and a need for housing, different housing options. So that's where all of that came from. And I don't remember a lot of comments or concerns from people about removing the trees along there, because there was also thought that we could have an expansion of Bowen Court, or there was some thought at that point of the Snug Cove House even sort of moving over there. So that strip sort of between the community center and the and Snug Cove House wasn't a big discussion point. Now, when we came to talking about trees behind the school, that was a very different thing. So that's why that was left out of the rezoning and the planning at that time. So to Rob's point, I don't, and I can't see a lot of concern for development happening along there.
Well, and since then, some housing needs are being addressed by the use of the adjacent lot and the proposed Bowen Housing Society site across the road, across Miller Road. So there are other projects that help to maybe reserve the use of this lot for community facilities.
Rob, I don't think at that time we were saying that there would just be enough housing. There was more housing needed than would be accommodated on lot 3, the other side of the road. So, and I think the housing needs assessment we've just done will also show that we need more townhouse, ground orientated row house type housing for families, small lots.
There still is a fair bit of room there for this typical housing operation. It's not like we're squeezing it right off the map by any stretch of the imagination, and it's just, that happens to be the only part that's zoned. I mean, we do have a tremendous ability in the rest of the lot too for housing. There's no question about that.
I think Jamie had a question. Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Liam. Just one question, I guess. It just occurred to me that, and I could be wrong, but that parking area, would anyone use that parking space for any other reason than using the community center? In other words, because we're losing parking where the healthcare center and the fire hall are going, and parking is becoming even more difficult, would people use this parking to go get groceries or go to the school because it's close?
Yeah, I'd like to think that it would be designated for community centered use only. That would be in my mind anyway. I think we can find parking for people somewhere else.
But how would you manage that? How would you police that, I guess, that people are not parking there?
It's a long walk to down the hill to the stores to go shopping from there.
Yeah.
And
that's a good point.
And when we had the lot on the corner by Village Square, where the housing is now, I think when I sort of watched every once in a while, and the people that were parking in there were the people that worked in Village Square, not people necessarily going shopping in Village Square.
Okay.
So Jamie, it is a good question. We talked about it with Scott Slater about, depending on where the after school care program is placed on the school property, like if that project gets traction, would it all of a sudden become a drop off and pickup zone for the after school care program, and people use that instead of because people will go to the easiest and closest, and so maybe that's okay, but I think we would have to monitor it, and if parking became an issue where it was clogged and overcrowded, we would probably then set up signs that said for community center use only, and then we might have to do some parking enforcement. But I think we would only do that if it felt like it was becoming an issue.
Certainly something we can deal with in the future. I mean, if it's some kind of a time parking thing or whatever, like we have in the code for, different time links and that sort of thing. But anyway, I don't think it's insurmountable. Let's just put it that way.
I was hoping just to help answer Rob's question a little bit too. If we go back to these early planning stages and we defined boundaries of where the community center land northern boundary was based on the needs at the time. So the question of why wasn't this thought of earlier? I think what we were trying to do is manage within a reasonable area for the program itself. And so the change here is the drivers to the site redevelopment and trying not to constrain future development. So I think, at the time we didn't need that area because we felt we could get it done in a smaller footprint. There's benefits and drivers to why we're doing it now, I think is what the answer is to me. The benefit is the laydown area and cost-effective additional parking because of the change. And that northern boundary was largely defined on topography, I would say. You know, that steep drop off was, you know, it was basically unusable area. And why would we go further north if we didn't need to and we could save as much land as possible?
Thank you, Sam, for that. And I wanted to also touch on Rob's point about the treed area too, because I think it's a really good point. And we have been hearing concerns from the community about the amount of activity especially in the cove and some of the land clearing that's occurring. And so, you know, I think this, you know, when, you know, we try to avoid land clearing whenever possible, but the reality is that if we're going to provide this service, we've got to be able to provide the access. And so I think part of our response is just that, as well as that, not to diminish the value of alders, because they're nitrogen fixers and very good for the ground. They, you know, it's not what I would call high value forest. And so
They're weed trees.
Well, I wouldn't call them weed trees, but they're not, they're not, it's not high value for protection purposes. I think it's a good trade-off, if I use a term like that.
Also, through all the consultations, we had a lot of people saying we hadn't provided enough parking.
Yep.
Yeah, the only problem with that one is that that relatively modest increase of the footprint and our reevaluation of the space that people have passing through took away parking that this replaces. It doesn't really add a lot. We took away like 16 spaces. That's a lot.
And how many have we added? Or in that, how much is in that new parking? I didn't have time to count up all those.
A little more than that.
I think it's 23 or.
Yeah. So there's
it's conceptual.
But again, yeah, exactly. Again, it is conceptual, and I think it's important to recognize that it's because it's just how the architects drew it. And Allison's right, like it would follow the contours of the land. It would maximize the space, minimize the disruption. And I think we could actually get quite a lot of cars in there. And you know, this drawing just shows, like, you know, the classic rectilinear parking lot, which is not the typical Bowen parking lot.
Yeah.
But Rob is, I think you're exactly right. We've got to be prepared for that, and I think.
Yeah, and I think that it's clear, and I'm happy to just move to the vote on this. But you know, the changes and improvements that have been made to the footprint to address a number of issues that were really important for accessibility and the community function, also necessitated a review of traffic flow and the placement of parking. And it's the type of lot, I think, describing it and showing it, you know, even maybe demonstrating it in a way that shows it more as that kind of less structured parking that's like here's the overflow parking. It also serves as construction staging area. It serves as all these things, and it's a space that is within the natural environment and not an asphalt paved parking lot, you know, in the proposal.
Yeah, well capitalized there, Rob. If there's no further comments, I'm just conscious of the time here, and I don't want to cut Jackie short on her very important mission here. That's for sure. So is there any further comments? If not, I'll ask a question. All in favor of that recommendation? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Allison, was that an aye? I didn't see her.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. I saw a finger. All right, did you get
I
that?
said aye.
Okay, good. And, okay, so we're gonna move on to other business, which is gonna be Jackie's update on donor recognition. Over to you, Jackie. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Can I go ahead and share my screen? No, hopefully that
Yeah.
works. All right, let's do that. Okay, so yeah, really happy to be able to present to you an update on the donor recognition initiative. And I up there. Yeah, so over the last few months, the project team, sorry, is there, okay, yeah, the project team and working with Gillian and Jamie, we've work through how we can move forward this initiative and come up with a plan for moving forward. So we want to just get you to speed where we're at and where that's led us. And of course, also after the last committee meeting in December, we were asked to investigate the idea of an exterior public art installation, recognizing donors with a budget that would be separate from the capital project. So we've done that as well, and I'd like to report back to you on that. So in terms of a timeline and meeting deadlines, we just looked at that updated schedule. We are hoping that, that the committee, maybe after this presentation, would have the confidence, have enough information to, make maybe a decision around location of the display. So hopefully we might be able to get to that, but let's get started. So, of course, our goal is to recognize and thank our donors for the contributions to the community project. Sorry, I'm just going to clear my display away here. Yeah, so that is, of course, impactful, long-lasting, and looks good with the rest of the building. So the policy that's been stated is that all donations of $1,000 or more will receive public acknowledgement. And so that is what we have stated in our policies. However, I just want to mention that there is an expectation by a lot of people who have donated even less than $1,000 that they will be recognized in some way. So currently our campaign, we have 5 different hierarchies and about 148 donors or pledgers, including 53 in the 1,000 plus. And 95 under 1,000. So again, just highlighted that they would like to be acknowledged. And of course, in the signage, we will have to also include the federal provincial governments for their support. And so yeah, and also obviously any kind of branding or logos that would need to be added. So the budget, I think you've seen that number 4. We had allocated $16,000 for the initiative, and that is included in the fundraising campaign budget, which was set at around $325,000, so you know, and this is an update. We spent about $120,000 of that. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna have to stop for 1 second because my dog is barking, and my apologies.
No worries.
Sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, when we started out, we threw around some just general questions that we needed to consider as we went forward with this, including, will the display be static or dynamic? That is, will we be needing to add to it down the road if we need to perhaps undertake additional fundraising or new campaigns? So that was a question we had. And of course, the answer would be yes. How long will it be displayed? And again, the policy references that it would be displayed in the community center. Is that for perpetuity or 35 years? Our understanding is that it would be there for the foreseeable future. We talked about wayfinding options and whether or not they should be considered in conjunction with the donor recognition sign, and obviously that was made sense. So we've had some conversations around that. And then just in terms of concept and design, how can we come up with something that will stand the test of time and remain still fresh and lively as years go by? So those general considerations led us to a list of criteria. And so this is the criteria we came up with. And the idea here is that all of our decisions going forward would be reflected against these criteria. And so this is what we've identified. If any of you have some ones that you feel are additionally important, please let us know so that we could add them. But generally, as we went forward, we kind of reflected again everything against these ways of measuring. Just to slightly touch on a few of them, obviously location is a huge factor. We'll look at indoor and outdoor, but also more specific location. Cost, in terms of our budget, really relevant, of course. And also just to take into consideration that we want to honor our donors in a gracious way, but we also there's a fine line. We don't want to look like we're spending too much or it's ostentatious in any way. So really need to be aware of how much money we're spending from that perception as well. Design, critical, of course. And at this point, we just still are talking about concepts. So we haven't really gone too far with design. But of course, we do know that it needs to be consistent with the architectural style of the building and, possibly reflect something of our local culture. So size, weight, obviously important depending on, will also impact the location, make sure that there's weight-bearing walls. Talking about material choice, again, making sure that it's aesthetically a good choice, but also that takes into consideration things like the wall treatment or the acoustics. Lighting is important, of course, in terms of whether or not you'll be able to see it, security, and whether or not it would be open to vandalism. Durability and maintenance, again, looking down from an operational point of view, what's going to cost to make sure that it stays in good shape, in good condition, is clean. Is it within reach? We're going to have to purchase extra equipment just to be able to clean it. So those type of things. Timeline, as far as the timeline goes, we think ideally the fabrication, design, fabrication, installation would really be done near the end of the construction phase, but enough time that we could have it installed for the grand opening of the community center. So again, those are all the criteria, and I'd like you to try to keep them in mind when we're going forward in terms of what influenced our decisions or our thinking on these different things as we go through. And if you have anything else to add, please let us know. So looking at indoor and outdoor installation, just some considerations. Of course, the indoor, there are vast possibilities within the building, which we looked at. It would be highly accessible to the public. We'll have lots of opportunities for the public to see it. Ensure that it is complementary. Again, that's reflecting back on that criteria. We have wall space available. Potentially must fit within our budget. And so we could consider a number of those criteria within the indoor and cover them all off. The outdoor art installation, similarly in terms of looking at the positive side, serving as that landmark or as an interactive installation. Again, that it would reflect the whole mandate of the community center about bringing people together. And public art has that ability to build community and that strong sense of reflecting our culture and our local community. Certainly could be designed to augment landscaping and be a really impressive feature of the building. However, the cost of the display is not included in the current budget, and additional funding would need to be secured. So that's a factor. And the outdoor art installations, we looked at possibilities. I think, grew to understand that it's considerably more complex than an indoor display would be. Learning more about what that might look like or what that might incorporate. So having taking a look at that and doing the work around that, we actually came to this consensus that, based on the research and discussion, that we really feel strongly that an outdoor installation not be considered at this time.
I'll move that.
Yeah, I agree.
Councillor Morris, that was definitely your comments, and reinforce some of the, or some of the work that we did reinforce some of your comments. And I mean, and also the factor that landscaping design has not been finalized, and so it's really difficult to identify an appropriate location, and also just, you know, go through that list of criteria to judge it against. And the cost, that's a big factor beyond the current budget. And we absolutely agree that the capital costs of the construction of the building should remain the priority for fundraising endeavors and activities. We don't know if there'll be additional fundraising needed at this point. Expectation, or we anticipate there probably will be. So that's where we need to place our efforts. And of course, this decision, or if this is the decision that it doesn't mean that in the future there can't be a separate project for public art installation, and actually would really encourage that happening maybe down the road to complete such a project that would be a separate project with its own budget. I don't know if you want to talk about that now, or just maybe I can go through some of the other slides and we can have a general discussion. Okay, maybe I'll keep going.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about the indoor display. So what I've got today for you are 3 location options that we have come to. You know, there were a number of other ones that we considered, and again, we go through our criteria, you know, looking at location cost and maintenance and lighting and weight, and we had to eliminate a number of them based on that criteria. And so this is what we've come up with for our 3 to consider today. The concept design possibilities, this is just very, very, you know, open to interpretation. We still really we are not, you know, it's not possible yet to really look at too many details on that. So what I'm showing you are really just concept ideas. We'd love to hear back from you in terms of some of your preferences, or what your thoughts are on some of these things. And I also have some really rough cost estimates, and this is just based on preliminary discussions with some potential vendors. Oops, vendors is spelled wrong, sorry about that. And so just so these price ranges will illustrate 3 levels, and also 3 levels of kind of complexity in terms of design. So our first one that I'd like to show you is, and I think the bottom right will show you really in terms of the location. The doors out there are front doors leading into the community center. So you would come in, and that grayish wall is the one that is the gallery wall, which is part of the large multi-purpose space. So, and the picture on the top shows the actual space that is available, that those 2 panels. We really like the size of this. We really like where it's located, that it is a prominent location in the building. It's will be a high traffic area. There'll be a nice lounge feeling in that space. So it's a nice place for people to linger if they wanted to take a good look at the display. It actually can be seen from other angles in the building as well. So we really like those aspects. It's really the only con that we came up with is that there is that beam, or that's a post in between those hubs, and that will break it up, which means that we'd have to come up with a design that really works well with that. But we think that is possible.
Yeah.
Option 2 is located near the back door entrance, and you can see in the left image where that wall is. It's the room on the other side are the washrooms, and so you would come in the back, and it would be to your left. We like this because of the size. Sorry, I didn't mention the other one, which was an adequate size. We felt the 13 feet by 8, 13 and a half feet by 8. This one is a bit larger, 16 feet. Almost 17 feet by 8. So it would allow for expansion. So we definitely have covered off that criteria. But in terms of concerns we had about it, it is kind of tucked away in terms of the main activities of the building. And it wouldn't be that a great trying to view it because, of course, that's a busy corridor and probably high pedestrian traffic back and forth, which also could bring up some issues around just maintenance because it could require a little higher maintenance and cleaning with so much movement back and forth around there. Number 2 and our number 3 option here is the wall. Would be facing you as you come in the back entrance again, and it's indicated on this drawing that it's 9 feet, but there is a door right here. You would be losing that space, so it ends up being more like 6 feet. So it's not ideal in terms of space, actually, but it's available to us, and it would be highly visible as people came in that door. But again, like the second option, it is tucked away at a view and kind of in the back, so not ideal. And again, the same issue about the maintenance. And we also thought that would be a really good spot for a community notice board. So a little bit less attractive than the other 2 options. So those are the 3 options of location. Just now going to take you through some design concepts and their cost estimates. So starting in the lower end, we had some considerations such as including some colored glass with etched graphic elements. We would like it to be reflective of the natural environment of our island, and possibly include some graphic treatment, maybe a kelp forest or other marine reference. And of course, we would maintain earth tones, wood grains to complement the community center, the architecture. And we would try to incorporate any of the branding around community center. So, these are just a list of some of the vendors they reached out to, some that people had worked with before and had recommended. Again, this is just at a very, very early stage, getting some idea of their capabilities and whether or not we might work with them in the future. So here's what we've come up with. In terms of the lower range, this is really basic. There's mostly it's printing on substances. I put in the Cove Commons donor recognition just for an example, even though it's in the floor. Just so you know that that's about 4 by 4 feet, and it does have applied etching and with the vinyl and surface on a digital print, and that has about 180 names on it, so similar in terms of the number of at this point number of donors, and that cost on that was around $6,800, I think, was taxes, or just under $7,000. So that's an idea. These other 3 also are similar in terms of materials and fabrication, so it'd be our lower range. The mid-range, which really incorporates more of our budget range, adds a little more detail in terms of design and colors. Again, going more into engraving or doing etching. And so a little bit more versatility in terms of design. And then I've got the third range, which is, $17,000 plus, so beyond our current budget, where you can start playing a little bit and having a little more fun in terms of coming up with a creative design. A lot of that extra cost is in the design cost, and certainly some fabrication costs as well. But it would definitely demand a higher budget, what we've identified at this point. So that gives you the range of ideas, the range of costs. In terms of next steps, obviously presenting today, and if we could build a consensus towards deciding a location, that would be fabulous. At that point, if we were able to do that, and also really talk a little bit more about that cost range. If we were able to do that, I would go back to some of the vendors to develop, for a little further design options. And then we'd be able to pull together a more concrete estimate, or at least it would still probably be an estimate until we came back again to the project management team and the committee when required to take a look at those to take a look at the, what we've developed further in terms of a design and a budget to go with those. And then once that is approved by committee, I'm not sure if we have to go to council for that final approval, but in terms of design and budget, but at that point we would proceed.
All right.
So that is the presentation. Please, if anyone has any questions, thoughts, or input, love to hear it.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. That was great. You've obviously done a lot of work on it. I'll tell you what I feel about it is the number one, I think it has to be near the main entrance. I think there's more traffic there, and I think it's more significant in there. It shows the importance of the donors I don't like it by the back door. Basic bottom line there. I think, and there's that funneling that goes on through the front door too. And it's a little bit more compressed there, so it would be more visible. I think the ability to update, I don't know how that whole thing works. We should be able to add on donors as they become donors. I think that's an important part of it. So that's a design feature that I'm thinking about. I don't think we have to spend more than 17 grand, but I think the 10 to 16 had some really nice options in there. It looked, it was a little bit easier to look at, but just the standard dedication wall from the 6 to 10 was, I thought, quite nice, and it could be updated pretty easily. And then my only other thing is, if we looked at any on-island artists that might be have a suggestion of what to do there, and that would be my comments. And David, going to you.
Thanks, Gary. A couple of questions. So I'm not quite sure how this fits with, so we sold seats to the theater earlier, and I presume those names go on the seats or something like that. I can't remember exactly how that all worked. How does this fit in with that? Or is this an addition, separate, together? How does that work?
Good question.
Yeah, so we have plates that we'll be affixing to the seats for those people who have sponsored seats, and we'll actually be doing more of a campaign around that. So the donor recognition sign, yeah, I mean, actually a good question, David. I don't really know the answer because I think we have to determine that there's also potential of room naming. So room naming, again, if you, or equipment, sponsoring equipment, so that is envisioned as you would be receiving a plaque or a plate or signage that would indicate and recognize that. In terms of it going on a sign as well, I believe that generally that's kind of a double dipping. So if you already have your name on the seat or on the signage by the door or by the equipment, you're not going to get your name again into the main donor sign.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what the objective is, because are we still going to try to get some big donors and give more recognition to big donors, or do we want something that shows which is something which I prefer? Well, I'd like to see both. I'd like it has to be by the front door, as Gary said. And I'd like it to demonstrate broad community support, so that you're not just giving somebody, Joe Smith, their name up there so they feel good about it. You're making the whole community feel like a whole lot of people were involved. So I think that's really important. To get big donors, to give them something bigger, like I like the idea of rooms or something of that sort. But I guess I would also like to feel that, I don't know, I'm still thinking this through. That everybody gets at the front, and then additionally maybe you got a seat and you got a room. I'm not sure. That all needs to be thought out. So I guess I'm just raising that. But I agree with Gary's positioning. And I don't think you need to go, I think it would look wasteful to have the, the high-end design. I think, a simple donor recognition plaque of some sort but nicely done is probably just fine. So probably the low end or maybe the medium end in terms of design. Are you going with the gold, silver, bronze and all that kind of stuff, or?
Yes, so there would be hierarchies that would be indicated in some design way that, so our larger donors would receive, it would reflect that in terms of the level of those donations. And yes, the intention, David, is to include all of our donors and to recognize the public in a way that everybody feels represented there. And sorry, just another comment you had. Yeah, that is definitely the intention. But, I know what I was going to say is large donors. I mean, it's very possible that some of the larger donors do not wish to have their names on the board. So they're identified as anonymous at that level. So that typically may happen as well.
Yeah, so my comments then are pretty general, pretty high level, but absolutely the location is at the front and not at some back door or side, no, right at the front. Fairly simple, demonstrates broad community support. In terms of color and design, I'm not an expert, so I have no opinion. But figuring out some way to deal with the hierarchies. I'm not crazy about the gold, silver, bronze because of the hierarchical stuff, but you've got to do that in some way or another. I'm not sure what the answer is. But if there are rooms for people who want to make a big donation, I'm quite happy, or a piece of equipment or something like that, sure. So, think out how you handle the double dipping part, because it could be a bit tricky, but how many people did seats and how many people you have left then? Like, you have to think all that through. So I won't offer an opinion, but that needs to be all thought through. That's all. Okay. Thanks, Jackie. Those are my comments.
Thanks, David. I'll go to Allison and then Rob.
So it needs to be inside, not outside. It needs to be near the front. I think the double panels suggested in the first proposal are way too big. We've got 148 donors so far, and that's not counting the seat donors, right?
Correct.
Okay, and how much money of those 148 pledged?
$1.2 million.
Okay, so we got 53 donors that have pledged over 1,000. So yeah, I know, not sure. I guess you want to put the other 48 on there just to show that we've had 150 people contribute in the broad community, but I guess you can do your hierarchy with the size of your type too. The other is if they're on the seat plaques, then I don't think their name needs to be on the donor plaque. And if they've got a room naming opportunity, then I'm trying to think what they did in Salt Spring with if there was any room naming and did their name appear on the plaque again. I mean, I guess if it's huge room naming, maybe, I don't know. My jury's out on that one. I was sort of, yeah. Okay, so how many donors contributed over 10 grand?
I do have those numbers, but I don't generally want to discuss them publicly because
they're going to show on the donor recognition board. I'm not asking for names. I'm just saying, did we get 10 donors that donated over 10 grand? So we've got $100,000, or we got 500,000 from 10 donors.
Yeah, I do have that data, Allison. I don't have it at my fingertips.
Okay, and as far as anonymous donors are concerned, just so the community and they recognize how much was donated, I think anonymous goes on as anonymous.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Rob?
Thank you.
Jackie, what was the amount for the seat dedications?
2,500.
Oh, 25.
Per seat?
Yes.
Right, so I would suggest that the donor wall starts at 5,000. and that usually the donor wall is about the major gifts and not the small gifts.
I think we did a policy, Rob, and we set it at 1,000. We should probably have distributed that policy to everybody before the meeting so they could have seen it. Because we did a donor recognition policy when we started in the
So
fundraising.
does your donor recognition policy have the categories of and what their benefits would be?
I think so.
So that should answer the question about if you get your name on a seat, then you don't get your name on a wall, or vice versa, and all of that. Because that should be in those categories. You should have listed here are the benefits of that category, and here's where you start to get on the recognition on a donor wall. If you do it to the level where you're actually using a donor wall for all gifts down to $1,000, then it's just a lot more names, and so you're filling up a space, you're showing it to be a community space. I think the front door area is the better positioning from that, and it appears that area with the 2 panels is really the only opportunity in that, close to the front door. So if we're mainly deciding on location tonight, I think that you're probably not going to get much objection to the idea of the front door location being most agreeable. But if we could have circulation of the donor recognition policy and how the levels are intended to be recognized, then we get a better sense of how that happens because yes, a person who names a room should also have their name on the donor wall. It's really like the room sign will be one way, but your donor wall is there to say all of these people over a certain level made contributions.
Right, and I will absolutely make that policy available to everyone. I just will note that the only thing that it does state is that $1,000 or more will be, I could even read it directly from that slide, will receive public acknowledgement on a donor recognition installation to be established in an appropriate central location. So that's the only real reference in the policy. There's no reference to hierarchies, but I do just want to emphasize that there is an expectation from the public that even if they donated less than $1,000, that they will be publicly acknowledged. And why I say that is because we had a form that was distributed, and we asked people how they would like, whether they would like to be, they would agree to being publicly acknowledged, and if so, how they would like to be acknowledged. And so I would say 85% of our donors who donated under $1,000 indicated that they would like to be publicly acknowledged, and that.
Yeah, most times people who donate money want to be recognized, and that's easy to manage outside of the donor wall. I mean, you can make an opening publication that recognizes everyone in print, and have different ways of acknowledging people in ways that are going to be a little bit more ephemeral than those who made major contributions and deserve to have their names on a wall. I think that people just want to have that recognition in some fashion in a public way, and that's easy enough to manage. But for the wall, if that's our discussion and the main thing is the location of the wall, then the front door location and design gets figured out according to how the hierarchy works in policy.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I don't want to overstate this, but I know with the Cove Commons, and we did put everybody on that donor wall who donated and wanted to be recognized. And we knew, I mean, people came, we had an earlier version, and people came to find their name. So again, there was, I think there would have been, could have been quite difficult had people seen that they were not included on that sign. So I'm just a little bit worried about the community in terms of its expectations.
Okay, thank you. Liam?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, we can easily share the policy. It might even be on our website. But just reiterating what Jackie said, it's pretty limited in terms of its scope. It does not get into hierarchical recognition beyond the $1,000. So I might suggest that if we want to get more specific about some of these larger potential donors and how we recognize them, we could amend the policy But I really like what Rob's saying too, is that
Mm.
we got to make that clear distinction between those that have got a significant contribution, and any contribution is grateful and helpful. But we want to make sure that we're making that recognition for the more significant contributions.
Okay, thanks, Liam. I guess Gillian and Jamie, you've obviously had some thoughts on this, and I'm sure your input's there. I think we have an overwhelming agreement that the front door area is probably the most favorable. There's no question about that. I don't see anybody in opposition to that. How about Gillian and Jamie? What have you thought about that? Gillian first.
Absolutely. We were internally leaning towards that front wall ourselves, and it's great to have a decision, because then we can proceed with some of the other wall treatment and lighting decisions and design for the rest of the building. So that's fantastic. We've had quite a few conversations about this and how to proceed. So I think thinking about what everybody's saying about how we recognize the different names, I think once we get some bids back from vendors that are talking about when we're looking at the number of names and how that may play out in the design, I think we need to bring that back to the group. And that'll help us make some further decisions around how do we balance design and numbers of names and hierarchy. So I think there's other factors that'll help us as we refine this further.
You're here. Jamie, have you got any input there?
No, I think that Jackie and Gillian have shared everything, I think.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Do you need a recommendation coming out of the committee on this, or do you just we could do a straw vote? And I think everybody's in favor of the front door. So I think we got the location pretty well pegged. And I think to Rob's point, I think there's a lot of work that still has to be done on the levels of recognition, and whether it's a room naming or a seat naming. If people choose that, that is going to obviously need some clarification. And I don't think we're in a huge hurry for it. What's your feeling on that, Jackie?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think I don't think you need a resolution, or we're looking for guidance, and we have heard what you have to say.
I do think we want something captured in the minutes, something to be.
Okay.
And we just put in, it was agreed by consensus that the front door is the appropriate area.
Sure, just something like that.
Inside the front door is the appropriate area for the donor recognition.
Great, thank you. And I also heard that you'd like us to look at that public or the policy and look at that further and ensure that it covers off all of those important factors.
I think that's really important. That has to be super transparent so that we don't disappoint anybody who may have a preconceived idea that their name is going to go on the donor wall.
I
think that's really
agree,
important.
I think it's important to think that these vendors have also had this exact same situation happen many times, because I'm sure it's a very common issue with the donor wall.
Yeah, and we also talked about at our last meeting was recognizing our funders as well, and what that looks like, and that's very important because it is required.
Oh, there's no question about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be big time. So I think Allison.
I had a question.
Okay, then David, and back to Rob. Thanks.
So the major donors like the province and the feds, I think they've got guidelines and stuff, and but I think I've seen them on donor recognition plaques in other places. They just get bigger type or whatever. These vendors you're referring to, have you actually gone to all of them and asked for proposals?
No, I have gone to all of them, but I gave them just some really broad idea of what we're doing, our timeline of our project. I did give them information about how many number of donors we might have, and the fact that we need to put them in a hierarchical positioning. And so what I did was I gave them some samples of what we might be considering. That's what these ranges are based on. So they just gave me some additional information. They gave me some ideas, some other things to consider. I mean, some of them we already had, but and yeah, just gave me some input and without any kind of expectation that I explained I was just trying to prepare it something for presentation so that we could move this forward.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so David?
Thank you, Gary. Just to clarify, just thinking about this a little bit, my thoughts about the hierarchy and you know, should every name get on there, even if they gave less than $1,000? I think we should have two objectives for this wall. Two things we're trying to get. One is to encourage people to donate, and that's by giving credit where credit's due. So, you know, bigger donors get some sort of bigger recognition in some clever design way. But the other is, I think, a political objective that I would like to see, and that is to demonstrate broad community support. Because there was, you know, there's been a struggle here. It's been a many years struggle, and some people have said, oh, you're building in the wrong place, it's the wrong thing, and all that kind of stuff. That's why I like to see as many names up there as possible. I want to be able to demonstrate, so when people come in, they see, wow, that's a lot of people. So that's why it's a tricky design issue, because some people might have given $50 and others might have given $1 million. And, you know, obviously we have to separate that out in some way, but I'd like both objectives to be part of this.
Yeah, that's a good point, David. And this isn't a donor recognition in a hospital, which is a totally different thing. This is a community donation. And I think we have to maybe separate those a bit. Over to you, Rob.
Just one last thing for clarity. I think that you were also bringing proposals in different price ranges, and I think that everyone's feeling that that there are appropriate designs within the current budget. So in case that wasn't, or needs to be reiterated, no one here is really saying we need to be looking beyond that.
Yeah, here. Yeah. All right. Any further comments? I think if there isn't, I'm just a little conscious of time here. And I think that's been a really good discussion today. Thank you very much, everybody. And so I think we'll move on. There's an information item there, a website on the island. And so next meeting, I guess, how about a TBA on that? Or TBD, and whatever, depending on our requirements.
That was going back to that timeline. If you're talking about May.
We can, once we have things better firmed up for the finalization of the tender package, then we'll be able to, we can either schedule another meeting, which I think is probably been like best for us to actually meet rather than trying to do it by email. Because we'll be looking at the tender package itself and seeking your approval to advance it to council, recommending council approve it to move forward to market.
So what council meeting would you be aiming for?
Oh, we just mapped it out the other day.
You're talking about the
sometime in May, I guess.
First one in June or the last one in May?
I think we're looking at the last one in May.
Yeah.
We're just mapping it out. And so it may shift because that is coming quickly because we would then want to have the information to you before we actually meet. And to get it onto the May, I don't have my calendar handy right here. To get it onto that last May one, we have to have it to council 2 weeks in advance. So
that basically means the first 2 weeks of May.
Yeah, we were looking at trying to have it solidified by May 10th. So we would be needing to meet with the committee that first week of May. So we'll be ironing out the actual dates and timelines as we move forward, and and be seeking availability as soon as possible. So we can at least plug a time into your calendars.
Yeah. So I think we'll just leave that as a PBA for now.
Yeah.
And you never know, we might get there a little bit faster. Who knows, eh? Anyway, that's a very exciting discussion tonight. It's nice to see this moving forward. And thank you, everybody, for all your work you're doing in the background on this. Is really a lot of work, especially when you get down to the doorknobs. That's pretty inspiring. And on that happy note, unless anybody else has any further comments, we'll say adieu and look forward to the next one. And again, thank you for all your great work on this.
Bye,
Night,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Steph.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.